Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue's sermon for Parshat Vayishlach. Today, I want to talk to you about the crown. Now, historically, the crown is above the parliament, but this week, we found the parliament dictating to the crown. Of course, I'm not talking about Buckingham Palace. I'm talking about The Crown, the Netflix series. The culture secretary wrote to the Crown saying that prior to every episode, there should be a warning. The warning should state that this is a work of fiction. Now, this idea was echoed by Melanie Phillips in the Times and came as a result of a storyline in The Crown that said that the Queen and Prince Margaret were not aware of their first cousins who were learning disabled and had been placed in an institution. Now, of course, the palace, the real Crown, contends that we knew all along about these cousins. They were not hidden from us, hidden from the family. This is a historical inaccuracy. But it's not surprising because The Crown is a work of fiction. So should there be a warning prior to the airing of The Crown that this is a work of fiction, or are people smart enough to figure that out for themselves? In this week's parasha, the daughter of Yaakov, Dinah, goes out to play amongst the girls of the land, and she is violated by Shechem, the son of Hamor. When her brothers hear about it, they are incensed. They insist that everyone in the town be circumcised, but at the moment of their great pain, they enter the town and slay all of the male inhabitants of the town. It's a terrible Chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name, and Yaakov calls them over. He says, Shimon and Levi, my sons, you have sullied my good name. Why did you do it? And they respond, Hachzona ya'aset achotenu. Shall our sister be made as a harlot? And then that's the end of the story. We don't find in the Torah that Jacob responds. Does Jacob simply accept what they say? What's his response? He's clearly not happy because there's a postscript at the end of his life. So what happens here in the story? Does he not know that she's been violated? What are they responding, and how does he respond to their response? I want to give you three answers. Answer number one is given by the Malbim. The Malbim says that you are telling us, Dad, that we're going to cause danger to our family by the fact that we have attacked this city. Now everyone's going to attack us in revenge. I want to tell you, they tell their dad, that had we not responded with our strong response as we did, we would have looked weak and we would have been even more vulnerable to the attacks of the inhabitants of the local area. This way, we showed that we will not stand for any violation. And the next thing we find in the Torah, Vayichitat Elokim, there was a fear of God amongst all the nations. No one wanted to approach the family of Jacob. And Jacob accepts that. He says, okay, I thought that this was going to cause physical insecurity, and I accept that this has secured our family. Answer number two is given by the Alshich, who says, Hachzona yaset achotenu, shall our sister be made like a harlot? Wait a sec, Dad. I know you feel offended that this is your daughter. But she's not just your daughter. She's also our sister. We defended our sister. We did this because she is our sister. It's not just about you. When Jacob hears that, he says, okay, this is your story and you're entitled to your part in that story. The third answer is given by Nachmanides, Ramban, who doesn't accept. He says, look at the postscript. At the end of Jacob's life, he's lying on his deathbed. And he chastises Shimon and Levi, curses them. He says, Arura Pamkiaz, their anger, may it be cursed. They were too bold. So if he accepted their answer way back when, why is he cursing them now? Clearly, he never accepted their actions. So what is happening here? Why doesn't he respond right now? Why does he wait till he's on his deathbed to respond? So listen to the exchange. I believe the exchange goes like this. He calls them into his office. He says, Shimon and Levi, you've sullied my good name. Here I am trying to be the patriarch of the world, trying to spread the message of monotheism, of ethics, of morality, as handed to me by my grandfather Abraham, my father Isaac. And you've now sullied my reputation. How can I go telling everybody about being good people when look at what you've done? They're going to point fingers at our family and say, well, look at your own issues first before you start lecturing us. And they respond, shall our sister be a harlot? And he doesn't respond. What's happening here? Roundabout, he gets them to admit what happened. He doesn't believe, he hears reports, but when you hear reports of Lashon Hara, of gossip, he hears that his sons committed these heinous acts, he doesn't believe it. You're not allowed to believe Lashon Hara. And when he approaches them, he doesn't start pointing fingers. He says, I'm feeling kind of bad right now. You can't contradict how somebody feels. And they say, well, this is why we did what we did. He didn't point fingers, but roundabout, they admitted to him their crimes. But he doesn't respond immediately because he may be in that moment of anger. Instead, he holds off. He says, okay, now at least I know that what I've heard is true. I'm going to respond at the right time. And he waits until his deathbed to truly tell them how he feels. You see, when it comes to the crown, the culture secretary is asking that there should be a warning that this is a work of fiction. But the truth is, throughout our lives, we need to have that warning sign up that whatever we hear, we have to assume is a work of fiction. We're not allowed to believe Lashon Hara. Our sages tell us that when you hear gossip, when you hear of someone else's misbehavior, you have to assume that it's not true, that it's a work of fiction, that you're being told something because chances are you don't have the full story. You have some kind of misrepresentation or misunderstanding of the facts, or the other person, there is a reason why they acted in such a way. There's missing information, and that's why you have to assume that anything you hear ill of someone else is a work of fiction. So let's review Yaakov's approach when you hear a report of misbehavior, because this is how we should act in our lives. We're not to believe Lashon Hara. Instead, how should we respond when we hear that somebody has acted inappropriately? Number one, don't believe it. Assume that any Lashon Hara is false information, it's simply fiction. But number two, let's say it's really bothering you because it affects you in some way. So if that's the case, number two is go directly to the source. Don't simply believe what you've heard on the street. Go to the source and approach that person directly. Number three, when you do that, don't start pointing fingers. Tell them how you feel. Just like Jacob has said, I'm feeling very hurt right now. I'm feeling that my reputation has been sullied. At which point they could have turned around and said, oh, it didn't occur to us that this would have an effect on the message that you're bringing. Instead, they got all defensive. And at that point, he realized that, number four, the facts were actually true. They acknowledged, they admitted that they had committed this crime. And number five, don't respond in your moment of anger. Jacob doesn't respond immediately. He waits until another time, till his own anger and emotions have subsided and he is able to respond responsibly. Because right then and there, his emotions would have been too great and he would have responded in a way that wasn't commensurate with the act that they had committed. So that's the 5 steps you need in order to deal with any situation of conflict in life. Number one, we don't believe it, but even if it's true, we have to know how to deal with it in the right way. May you always remember to filter out any reports of questionable behavior with the warning message that what you're hearing now is, at best, a work of fiction, at best, based only very vaguely on a true story. Shabbat Shalom.